Hey, it's Nicole. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're talking with co-founder of Kitcaster, Ryan Estes, and he is going to share about how he is an expert in leveraging podcasts for both meaning and profitability. And I can't wait till you hear everything that Matt and I have to ask him today. Let's jump in as we talk about his next project that just launched in 2022 called Wildcast. Let's go.
Hey, if you're an entrepreneur who usually fast forwards intros just like this one, this is the podcast for you.
Ryan, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me, Nicole and Matt. I really appreciate it.
Hey, just a reminder, our show is brought to you by SmartCookie Media, where we believe data tells a story, and not just any story, your business story. As a subscriber to the show or as a client, you'll get insights on profitable, data-driven marketing strategies that work for you and your business, your industry, not some cookie cutter trends. No, ideas that are led by your customer data so you know they'll work for you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram to learn more. Everything's in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the show. How would you finish this sentence? You know you're an entrepreneur when?
You know you're an entrepreneur when you no longer define yourself as an entrepreneur. And I'll expand on that a little bit. So define yourself as an entrepreneur is kind of taking identity cues, is kind of how I look at it. And I'm going to speak strictly from my own experience. No disrespect to anybody who calls themselves an entrepreneur. I love those people. Those are my people. But for me, it's important to keep a malleable identity, particularly professionally. As an entrepreneur, oftentimes we have to make really hard decisions, which usually comes in the form of killing ideas. The hardest are the ideas that are really good, but aren't working. For whatever reason, you're not finding traction. You're not finding market validation. You're not finding product market fit. But oftentimes as an entrepreneur, we fall in love with these ideas. We tell all of our family and friends what we're working on. And that makes it exceptionally more difficult to make hard decisions when the times come. I have a little bit of a head start, largely because my previous life as a musician and working in the music industry was my entire identity. Everybody I knew I was working on music and making records and touring. And when I had to put that away, it was very difficult, because a lot of the way that your friends and family look at you is kind of the box you put yourself in. For me as a songwriter and a performer, that's how they knew me. So when I moved on to other things, not only was it challenging for them, but it was really challenging for me. So for me, becoming an entrepreneur is largely about giving myself the freedom to make mistakes.
To make mistakes. I feel seen and attacked.
Well, and there's kind of a contagion, if you have an unsuccessful idea, your business flops, whatever happens, then all those people that were rallying for you and they were all bragging about you to their friends, now they're invested in your success and it flops. And now they've got to go back and be like, oh, well, you know what? I don't even know what Ryan's doing anymore. That last thing didn't pan out. And there's a certain cultural collateral that they've got to pay for that. I've certainly seen it in my career. My family and friends, they love me, but they tend to back away because they don't want to be invested and nobody likes to take an L. But as entrepreneurs, that's what we do. We try and take them in mass succession. It's helpful when you have other friends that are kind of on that path and they can kind of understand your enthusiasm and excitement and momentum. And then doesn't work, got to move on, doing something new.
Yeah, funny how I just was reflecting back to, this is going to sound so terrible, but let's all think, our listeners included, so there's no judgment here. Let's think back to some relationships that maybe we went through quickly. Right? Like in college, in high school, we could sometimes make some quick decisions to have some closure in a relationship real quick. And people were okay with that. Our friends, our buddies, everybody got that. Where if you did it later when you're happily married and you got your kiddos, that's a different world if you choose that life and not as easily palatable and acceptable. Matt and I have known each other since undergrad and then split off. He went to law school. I went to business school. But still, this is one of those things that we were always talking about, entrepreneurship and business. And nobody could just listen in on our phone calls. It wasn't until later that we were like, okay, let's turn the mics on. Because then if we can find community that gets that we have to take the losses and figure them out quickly. Like you said, make those hard decisions.
And I've never thought about even our family and friends that maybe never gave us $1 to the investment of the business became emotionally invested, became intellectually invested because they're talking to you. And in some regards, you're kind of almost like burning relationship currency when the business fails in a weird way.
Yeah. This identity conversation is even, I think, more broad than that. We're certainly in a time culturally where identity is such a key component to absolutely everybody. We're in this position where we're kind of putting labels all over our chest. And
Mhm.
intrinsically, well, and probably just from spiritual practice, I realized the dangers in that as far as just like suffering. You know, it's really fun in the beginning to be identified as an entrepreneur. The skies are all sunny. And then it gets hard for the lucky, you know.
Yeah.
I meet people that hit home runs right out of the gate, and I'm like, oh boy, it's going to be a little bit more challenging for you down the road with the benefit of hindsight. But really, like in the beginning, like this is really hard. And so if you're so attached to who you are as being a product of financial success, about like some kind of social climbing or just looking good to your peers, you're setting yourself up for like a world of pain. And there's enough pain out there to go around. I'll share a story, probably
Please.
a defining moment for me, a real gut check. I'm big on gut checks because I am an enthusiastic person. I have to make sure that like what I'm doing, I'm looking at soberly and I'm making good decisions based on data. Well, this was probably 10 years ago, I would say, maybe more. I had a company that was doing pretty good and I'd worked on a couple of projects that were kind of floundering and just financially was kind of in a tight spot. I had two very young children, wonderful wife that was staying home taking care of them. So really I was the primary breadwinner and just in kind of like a sticky situation. Well, I'm at my brother's high school graduation and my grandfather, rest in peace, was there, who's absolutely the most wonderful, magnificent man I've ever met in my entire life. He lived in San Diego, came out to Colorado for the graduation, and he pulled me aside. And he doesn't speak critically, take that lightly. Like he's a very encouraging person. And he was just like, Ryan, you guys are kind of struggling. I'm like, yeah, no. He's like, maybe it's time to just go get a job. You're highly competent. People would be happy to have you. You've got these kids. You got to think about this. Maybe it's time. He was so encouraging. He was a major general in the Marine Corps, a commanding officer at Camp Pendleton. He's a very impressive man and was always very enthusiastic about what I was working on. But to have him waver, to have his faith waver in me was pretty wild and obviously brought up some big emotions. But what it didn't bring up for 1 second was doubt. So from a mindfulness perspective, like kind of investigating my emotions after that conversation we had, it's like, oh, well, I could see his perspective.
Right, yeah.
He made some good points, but he doesn't see the vision that I see.
Mhm.
So I was able to continue and pursue. And that's when basically I knew that that was it. There's no turning back,
Yeah.
and you're going to go up, you're going to go down, you're going to go all around. But the important thing is to celebrate the wins, but don't identify personally as like, I'm the winner guy,
Right.
because you're teeing yourself up for some pretty harsh suffering when things turn around.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. So tell us, before we get too much farther, what do you do now? What businesses do you own today? So the listeners can join in on all of that.
Yeah. Serial entrepreneurs. How are you guys doing? My people.
Yeah.
Currently, I'm co-founder of two companies. One is Kitcaster, which we work with SmartCookie a lot, and we're very happy to, where we book funded startup founders on the world's top podcasts. So with Kitcaster, largely we're working with funded startup founders, entrepreneurs with exits, C-suite executives, and we book them on podcasts, and that's all we do. So we're heavily vested in podcasting. I'm obviously very bullish in podcasting in general. There's 20 of us here in Denver with a few folks sprinkled on the East and West Coast. Second company is called Wildcast, and this is a new venture. I've been working on it about a year, and Wildcast is a podcast advertising marketplace, specifically for host-read ads. So what we do is connect brands, specifically business and technology brands, to business and technology podcast hosts and audiences. So if you've heard a podcast host that says, I just want to give a shout out to Slack. Slack's a great opportunity for you to chat with your coworkers without dealing with email. Shout out to Slack. Use a promo code SmartCookie and you can save yourself 10% when you sign up. That's a host read ad. And we facilitate that for podcast hosts. One way to look at Wildcast is really we're kind of the sales and sponsorship arm for these podcasts and negotiate kind of the creative and the budgets coming in from the brands.
Wow.
So really excited about Wildcast. We launched our beta software about 3 weeks ago, and we've got a bunch of updates coming soon.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Excellent. So tell me, what's your story? What led you to entrepreneurship? Here you had a grandpa, man, in service to this country. So what led you here? Was there a specific moment or event or experience that you knew this would be your life's work?
I took to it early because I like money. I'm pushing around a lawnmower in the summers, making 15, 20 bucks here or there. I'm raking leaves in the fall. I'm shoveling sidewalks in the winter. Anything I could do to scrape together some cash, I was doing it. I really wish I had a big inspirational type story, but largely my impetus to kind of head out on my own was because I had horrible bosses.
Same.
That really
Same.
seemed like, I don't want to say evil because that takes some kind of judgment, but like vindictive and mean and like
Yes.
just disgusting. And to me, I was in a point where I could be a little bit idealistic to be like, you know what? I'm not going to work for somebody who treats me like that. Or even worse, I can take a lot, but would treat my coworkers in a terrible way.
Yeah.
And I had 3 or 4 of those. I've been fired a handful of times from random jobs. So really, I just felt like I can't do worse.
Yes, right. Yes.
I can't do worse than this. And at my best, I think I can actually provide a form of leadership that would be nurturing and helpful for people. In a sense, I was always looking for like a mentor, and I never found one, but I realized that I could be the mentor for myself when I was, starting out 15, 20 years ago with the team. And so like that really became kind of an inspiration. It's like, okay, hey, you don't have someone kind of blazing a trail for you to shine the light, but you can do that for other people. So unfortunately, my road to entrepreneurship just came at the hands of torture from malevolent bosses.
Yeah. I worked for Disney villains too. And you're either a henchman or you're a hero. And so I see you took the hero path.
You say it so nice, by the way, when you wrap it up in a Disney villain, because everyone kind of likes their Disney villains. We're not being mean and calling people bad names, but no one likes a little Captain Hook as an anecdote.
No, we don't want to see them win the game though. So,
no, we don't want to see them. No, by no means.
I
But I like how, Ryan, you basically use that fuel for the fire, so to speak. And I noticed you said something there that was pretty interesting. And that is, even though it was very self-reflective, hey, I feel like I'm getting beat up all the time. I'm going through all these things. I'm getting fired. You actually said something that shows me the type of leader that you are and probably the type of companies that you're building. And that is, you talked about how, well, hey, I don't want to see my coworkers treated like that. So even probably in certain aspects, as you were working for other companies, maybe you weren't the one getting, quote, picked on and or being, abused, for lack of a better term, maybe, but yet you're seeing it happen in the marketplace. You're seeing it happen in your company. And that even propelled you. So I want to commend you. That's awesome. You can leverage that to propel you to where you're at today.
Yeah, I'll tell another story along these lines. I was in a cubicle at a sales job, and a woman next to me was going through breast cancer treatments. And so she was kind of at her desk and just kind of quietly weeping. She'd just gotten back from a treatment and was like trying to put together for work. And I mean, like quiet, like I could hear her, but I was right next to her. I was just like, hey, you okay? And the owner of the company, a woman who had also gone through breast cancer treatment, came over to her cubicle and kind of leaned in and was like, you need to cry on your own time. While you're here, you need to stop right now.
No.
I was like, oh my goodness, what?
Yes.
And so she stopped crying and the owner left, and then she started crying, like kind of stifled, trying to hold up. I was like, let's go for a walk, and just walked it off or whatever. That was a big turning point,
Right.
And particularly I try and be careful with what's going on in my headspace as best I can. I believe that kindness is a practice. And so I wanted to practice kind thoughts, but literally I was fantasizing about gnawing a popsicle stick into a shank and stabbing her in the neck after doing that to my coworker friend.
Right.
I was like,
Oh,
mentally, I don't need to be thinking these terrible
yes.
fantasies.
Right.
I got to get out of here.
Yeah, we both need a walk right now. Let's both
Yes.
go. I know you said you didn't have some big story, but who made you this way? Tell me about that, because it happens way earlier, right?
I don't know. And sorry for the violent imagery there. I would never stab anybody with a popsicle stick.
Of course not.
I wouldn't.
As an attorney on the line, I'm giving a legal disclaimer that Ryan has never, nor has he ever thought about.
No. But hey, I don't know where these thoughts come from. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I only know what I can do with them.
Yes.
I have my same friends from kindergarten. So maybe there's a portion of me that's very loyal at my core. and maybe injustice is a big motivator for me. I think another big motivator for me has just been responsibility. When I was 19, I was hitchhiking across the west coast of America and Alaska and through Europe, spent 2 years as a vagabond, and it was absolutely the best time. I just never wanted it to stop.
Yeah.
I just
Wow.
wanted to be free from responsibility forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Says
ended
the
up
guy
with
with says the two kids. I was going to say, says the guy with 2 kids now and is trying to,
kids, two
Two
companies.
businesses,
two companies.
20 employees in one of them. Never wanted
Never
it to end.
stopped.
You talked about always being defensive and protecting the headspace, what you're processing, not just in the past, but now as a company owner. All of us own businesses, all of us own companies, or have to make major decisions on behalf of companies. Can you speak to a little bit more about protecting that headspace now, even in your current role?
Yeah, I would love to. I am an American Buddhist. So the headspace to me is a significant portion of my practice.
Mhm.
So I just stopped talking about defining yourself and giving yourself attributes. It's actually taken me a long time to kind of be able to say, I'm a Buddhist, because that carries a lot of different kind of emotional baggage for different folks.
Mhm.
Some folks, oh, that means you're not this or you're not that or whatever it means. But largely what Buddhism is, particularly in American context, it's a practice. It's not something to believe. It's something you do. Now, there is kind of some foundational work that's attached to that. There's a moral life that if you kind of do kind of these gut checks, it is baked in to a lot of these practices. So it kind of comes into be like, you're who you pretend to be. So who do you want to pretend to be? And for me, it's a spirit of kindness and generosity and virtue, for lack of a better word, and at the risk of being super corny. I practice these things. For me, you want to be happy, you practice happiness. For me, that's like playing guitar. Or I want to be a more kind person, than I do mantras around kindness. So I think protecting the headspace for me is actually kind of disciplined practice to check in on myself to see how my head is doing. I know
Mhm.
personally, if I'm not protecting my headspace in the appropriate way, I can't really do math off the top of my head. Like I'm struggling to do consumer math in my head,
Mhm.
which allows me to know that like, oh, so I'm chewing on something. I need
Right.
to find out what it is. To protect my headspace is to realize I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to have ups and downs, and to allow those things to happen in a natural way, guide what I can. And where I do make mistakes, be the first person to come back and be like, hey, I blew it right here. Let's
Right.
work this out. Let's talk about this. Because largely I'm really hard on myself, but I want to make sure that like with other people, they know I care about them and they know that they're important to me. So
Right.
that kind of helps, I think, keep my head in line, at least in business, as best I can.
Has it ever had an impact where you had to back the train up on some tracks, even in a business decision because of that? And let me elaborate real quick. At one point in time, I somehow fell in 2008, becoming a bankruptcy attorney. I did that for several years. And it wasn't until I'm 3, 4 years into it, rather successful at it, I'm sitting in a hot tub in Mexico looking out. And all of a sudden I realized I did not like the person I was becoming. What was
Mm.
going on in my head, how I was treating people. Somewhere along the way, everything was win-lose for me. I was doing a lot of bankruptcy litigation and some nasty stuff with divorces. And I'm like, this wasn't the person on why I went to law school or what I wanted to do with my life. But it took me 3 to 4 years down the road of going down a certain track and a certain business path for me to realize it. And I was pretty committed to that business. Have you ever had a business venture that you had to back the tracks up because you didn't realize that you were letting some things creep into that headspace?
Oh yeah.
He's like, oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've lost friends, good friends that I went into business with, because oftentimes maybe folks can relate to this. When you're really good friends, maybe even your family, with the people you're in business with, you take certain liberties. You take things for granted that you wouldn't with somebody that is a colleague. And unfortunately lost relationships forever, and definitely had to like back it up from that and do some foundational work of like, hey, what's the point? If you're turning into a monster, or like you're not basically allowing good faith to emerge from somebody who's going through something challenging.
Right.
Mhm.
And this is also kind of an attribute of somebody who's maybe really justice oriented like me. So if I figure out I'm right, it's like, oh, I'm going to prove my point more than I want to allow someone to like find an opportunity for grace and good faith in what they're doing. This is just part of our human experience, and humans are dynamic and, hard.
Yeah.
I like to say people are people-y. So
Well, I'm saying to myself right now, thank God I never had Ryan as a boss when I was younger. I'd still be in the corporate world. I'd be working for his company probably.
This is true.
This
This
is-
is true. Okay, so here's a question for you, and it really is on our mind a whole lot lately. When was the last time you were distracted in your business? Some people call it shiny objects or squirrels, but sometimes they're your brightest idea. Can you talk us through a story that maybe you were distracted or you were noodling on something new, and talk me through how you made that decision?
Yeah, I give all my ideas respect and a place. And I've got a lot of ridiculous ideas. My favorite
Same.
idea I haven't worked on yet is a helicopter soap dispenser for the shower.
Yes, I pictured it immediately.
I was getting my car washed and I was like, why don't I have this in my shower? I mean, I don't know. It's a terrible idea, but you know what? Terrible ideas and good ideas come from the same place. I can't stifle terrible ideas because then it might stifle good ideas. But shiny object syndrome is a major problem, and I am definitely guilty of it. So for me, honoring and respecting where those places evolve come for me in the form of a list. I use Trello basically as a place to put all my ideas. And I like it because you can go horizontal with the list in like kind of a post-it note fashion. So whatever's on the left is my priority, and everything that's on the right is then waning in priority. So because I know I've got mouths to feed and I have responsibilities, that what I do, if I choose to work on it, it has to be all three different things. It has to be of service because that's important for me to feel fulfilled as a good human being that I'm contributing to the betterment of all sentient beings. Two, it has to be fun, largely because although I have all these responsibilities, I'm kind of lazy. And if it's not fun, I'm just not going to do it.
Love it. I
it.
love it.
Oh, I just won't. I just know that about myself. I'm like, hey, this is kind of, I don't like doing it. I won't do it. Three, it has to make money because I'm putting the load on my shoulders and carrying up the hill as fast as I can for my kids who are coming right up behind me. So I have this litany of ideas, and the soap spinner really isn't of service. It's super fun. It's fun to think about, and it doesn't really have a chance of making money. So I put it far right on my lists.
You give it a home, though. That's
Yeah.
great.
And it sounded like you also give yourself time to digest those things too. Was there ever anything on that far right that popped up and actually did become something pretty big for you?
Kitcaster definitely did.
Oh, really?
Well, Kitcaster came as a result of Brandy Whalen and I's relationship. She's the co-founder of Kitcaster. At the time, I had a media marketing agency that I ran with my wife. We had, 35 clients, handful of employees. It was doing good. My wife was basically managing that whole side, and I was spinning ideas. So I was taking stuff from the right on my list and bring them into the world. And these are all kind of validations. So I put them all aside, but gave them a good effort. I had a company called Poppin' Cookies. That was a order by SMS text messaging cookie company, exclusively a cookie subscription company.
Mhm.
I launched a company called The Blillo, which was a blanket, but also a pillow.
Nice.
I launched a line of natural deodorant products as kind of a foundational product to a whole cosmetics line that never materialized. That was called Body of Work. And I was working on a software called Career Funded that was basically career funding for service industry and, let's say, blue collar type entrepreneurs and small businesses.
Wow.
And at the time, I was probably 18 months into Career Funded, and it was kind of sputtering, which was frustrating because it was a really cool platform. It's like Kickstarter for house painters or for stylists. Side note, had I held onto this when COVID hit and all your like barbers and stuff were pre-selling their services,
Yeah.
perfect. So again, time and place. It's not a bad idea. It was a good idea, just wrong time, wrong place. So I'm 18 months in. I'm super excited about this software that I built, but it's just not getting traction and there's just too much hand holding. And so I'm like, all right, well, time to move this further to the right. I need to find something else. I got lunch with Brandy Whalen. She's just extraordinary human being, very creative and always looking to like mix something up. I had met her because I had a founders podcast for many years here in Denver, and she would book her clients on my podcast and we just clicked. And so we're getting lunch and she's like, let's work on a project. Let's do something. I was like, okay, I got time right now. And so we were kind of just brainstorming some ideas and we're like, well, let's do something in podcasting because that's how we met. And I love podcasting and I never shut up. She's like, okay. So we went through a couple ideas and we're like, well, you book people on my show and that was a great service to me. Why don't we spin up something like that? So we kind of created a pilot program. It did great right off the bat. And then, COVID hit and it really popped. Then everyone was home. And if you remember, all the entertainers were on strike. And so the only
Mhm.
thing that had new content was podcasts.
Yeah.
And so we were able to grow pretty quickly.
Wow.
Like
And
this is something that starts on the right of my list, has to
Right.
go through validation.
yeah.
Is it service? Is it fun? Does it make money? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, let's go to the next level. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Now we're here 3.5 years later.
Oh, incredible. Gosh, I love this story.
That's the essence of the Serial Entrepreneur Show right there, right? You know what I mean?
So let's dive into profitability for podcasters and or guests. Meaning and profitability is your thing when it comes to podcasts. So I'd love to know what you've seen over the past few years.
You bet. I'll try and be factual because I'm so corny about podcasting.
We'll take both.
Yeah, we'll
We
take it
like
all
both.
of it.
I really think it's absolutely extraordinary and healing for our culture. These conversations that we're having all the time. It's the only place that we get each other's undivided attention in podcasting, that we're not glancing down at our phones. It's amazing. And it also brings out some of our more noble human qualities, which is to kind of run to meet people in the middle where you connect and bond. Social media, was it a net negative, net positive? We'll know in 20 years. But one attribute of social media is it allows you to experiment with your personality, experiment with your views, which is really cool. You can try stuff on, but oftentimes how that's come across now is people experimenting with extreme versions of their views and then
Mhm.
sniping each other, whether it's recreational outrage or it's just downright trolling. This is just a feature of social media in its essence. Whereas a feature of conversation, particularly with people that have never met before, is that you go find common ground as soon as possible because that's where a bond is formed. We don't immediately try and find where we disagree and then take the furthest extreme opinion because humans are generally good natured. And the reason we've evolved as a species is because we collaborate. It's incredibly important. On one hand, fundamentally, we're talking about being of service. I sleep really well at night because we book 400 podcasts a month where people get to have these opportunities, these experiences. And to me, that's really important. Now, does the podcast go great or not? I don't know, but that's a part of the magic, So the meaning part for me, when it really resonates and what I really love hearing from our clients is this is extraordinary. And I'm like, I know. They're like, it elicits something new. I'm like, yes, I know.
Mhm.
It gives you opportunity for personal growth. It gives you opportunity for professional growth. It gives you opportunity to kind of fall flat on your face and recover, you know, because hour-long conversation, it's like, who even knows what's going to come out of my mouth?
Right.
So from the meaning perspective, I just feel like it's self-evident. It's just intrinsic. If people can get over the big emotions that come up, whether that's imposter syndrome or who are these people compared to me or any other things that come out from doing podcasting, it's going to be a fundamental shift in themselves as a person and a professional without a doubt. The profitability, though, of course, is very important too. So talking about case studies, we're working with funded startup founders. So what do they want? They want new clients. No doubt about it. That's priority number one. So if we're talking about top of funnel, thought leadership, what's going to distinguish my flat blue logo from their flat blue logo? A lot of times it's going to be the founder. And the
Right.
reason why I went with this instead of that is because I heard them on a podcast. So product differentiation by sincere leadership goes a long way. We've had people that have connected to investors that spent $1 million investing into their product through
Right.
podcasting. That's happened several times. We work with venture capitalists that essentially any deal that they come across, they give their founder to us, a kind of way to get reps, What we found also is that founders, particularly technical founders, if you're in data compliance and your software is very complex, it's kind of hard to talk about it if you're
Yeah.
really deep in the weeds to kind of simplify it in a way
Mhm.
that your prospective customer understands what the heck you do.
Yeah.
We train them though. We institute what we call storycraft. So everybody coming in gets at least an hour where they sit down. First, we address, are there any big emotions that are coming out? Second, we address, what do you do in 8 words? And then we address, what are some stories that you can tell that maybe kill at cocktail parties and stuff like that, that's going to
Yeah.
endear you to the audience? Because you really
Yes.
got to kind of grab the audience attention really quick, not necessarily for the audience or for the host, but just to have a little bit of confidence going in, oh, I'm staring down 60-minute interview. What are we going to talk about? It's you got a little bit of agency here that you
Yeah.
can steer the conversation. So we want them to come into interviews with you guys being super confident, having material ready to go. And, know what it is they do.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Nice.
So talk to us about profitability in terms of Wildcast. So you were trying to make sure the podcasters make money off this thing too, not just have the meaning, but to make money too.
Absolutely. And traditionally, podcasters that make money are the big shows for good reason. They've accumulated a gigantic audience, millions of downloads a month because they have true crime, or they eat elk meat and smoke DMT, or whatever they've done to get giant audiences. Then the model for people that aren't familiar is a CPM based model. So CPM is cost per mile, which is Latin for some reason, which means cost per 1,000 downloads. So for every 1,000 downloads, you get paid a negotiated amount, let's say $10. So if you have 1 million downloads and it's $10 per 1,000, you get paid $10,000. The math works out pretty well. Well, the podcast that we've been working with forever, Business and Technology, will never amass millions of downloads because it's not entertainment. Rather, they're solving problems. They're bringing people on that have solutions. So the audience is a little bit different. If I'm listening to true crime podcasts while I'm working, it's in the background. I'll pop in and out. My attention varies. I'll hear the advertisement for AG1, whatever. But when I'm looking for a solution, let's say how to optimize my Google ads, and I go to that podcast, I'm not doing anything else but listening to that podcast.
Right.
I'm taking notes. I'm tuning into this show because I've been listening to it for 3.5 years. So the attention is better. And the relevance between the brand that wants to advertise, the host, and the audience has an opportunity to be like airtight. So when we're looking at building Wildcast, we only want to make this for podcasts that are providing solutions and for audiences that are looking for solutions, because we believe that's more valuable. And we believe that we can get a better CPM than any other advertising company out there because our relevancy is so high. So I think that ultimately that's best for the brand, that's best for the podcast host, and that's best ultimately for the audience.
Tell me, is there something we didn't ask you that you wanted to share with our audience today?
I don't think so. If they are podcasters, do you mind if I plug Wildcast?
Please.
Yeah,
Please do.
go ahead.
It's gowildcast.com. If you're a podcaster, we're trying to get you paid. It's free, of course, to sign up, but even better than that, we're trying to pay you. If you're interested in highly relevant advertising, I'd encourage you to go there as well and sign up as an advertiser, and you can talk to me directly.
That's
Nice.
incredible. Is there any limits or minimums or anything that everyone should be aware of? Or are you just trying to work with everybody, see who shows up?
There will be. We'll probably institute a $50,000 minimum investment for advertisers in Q3, but right now there really isn't. We're willing to work with anybody's budget, assuming they have a budget, and get them the service they need.
What about listenership and downloads on the opposite end? Just for those of us that are podcasters.
Not now.
Okay.
We probably will at some point, but not now. Right
Okay.
now, we're in the business not only of like helping podcasters earn cash, but also growing their shows. And
Awesome.
we have a pretty awesome curriculum and also just a bunch of vendors that can really help grow people's shows
Great.
exponentially.
Awesome.
Incredible. I love it. I love it. Okay, so tell me, what is one of the key lessons you learned as an entrepreneur? Maybe it's something you find yourself saying again and again.
Don't trust your accountant. Do your numbers.
Notice he didn't say
Oh.
attorney, by the way. Notice he did not say attorney. Everyone loves their attorney,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Everyone's got the
totally.
bumper stickers.
I'm calling my attorney. I'm like, please.
I'm calling my attorney because I need to sue my accountant, is what it sounded like there, by the way.
We all have bookkeepers. We all
Right.
have
Yep.
tax preparers.
Yes.
Not trust it. Do your own numbers at least monthly.
I want to know what your definition of entrepreneurial success is.
For me personally, I would say what will make me feel like a success forever is that my wife was able to stay home with our kids. They're in high school now, so we're trying to get away from them as much as possible. But that was a financial end that was most important to me because it was most important to her.
What's next for you? I know you're working in Wildcast. Is there anything else that we need to know? It's on the far right besides the helicopter. Anything that's percolating we need to know about, or this is
No,
it?
I'm doing everything I can to keep everything far right to make sure that Wildcast gets the launch it's going to get. So
Incredible. We signed up today, so
Oh,
check
all
one
right.
more off. Yes, for sure. Excited to see what you're up to and what you're doing. Thank you so much, Ryan. This
Thank
was a
you, Ryan.
blast.
This was awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was awesome talking to you guys.
Hey, if you're an entrepreneur who usually fast forwards intros just like this one, this is the podcast for you.
Okay, so one of the takeaways that I had was he is a co-founder, right, of both of these businesses that he is running right now.
Yes.
And how powerful it was. It was over lunch with a colleague that they could collaborate over something. And, frankly, I think about me and you. I think
Right.
about how many conversations that they would have had over the years. She would send people to be on his show, like they would have conversations. And I think about our conversations, frankly. You'd call me or I'd call you about somebody's business. Something's happening, something's going on. I really thought how powerful over lunch, when two of us get together, when we can collaborate on something, how it can just make sense really quickly, really easily. And hear, the success that they've had. And I just love that. I love to hear like how something can get decided over lunch and a collaboration can be born. It was really, really cool to hear that.
When we asked him for an example of what was that shiny object, what was that thing that you ran after, even though it was way far over on the right, the Trello board, it became like his biggest hit so far, his grand slam so far.
So think about that, right? So as a shiny object or as a squirrel, it wasn't on the board until lunch, right? He said he had several things, maybe to the right that were moving left, including a software project. You know what that's like.
Yeah.
And then they meet over lunch and it's like, hey, we both like podcasts. I want to work on a project together. Let's work on a project together. I think she sounds a whole lot like me. But anyway.
Yeah.
So that whole let's work on a project together.
Right.
I don't even think it had time to go to Trello until after that lunch. It didn't go far right. It just popped up in that moment. And yeah, it could be one of the brightest things that he's taking care of.
That takes me to takeaway number 2, which is he talked about he had to vet it. And what does he do to vet those ideas? It's a process. He gives it a time and a place to go through it. He puts it in a place on Trello. He gives us time to digest. And he uses that 3-step approach. Service. Is it of service to people? Is it helping better humanity, so to speak? Number 2, is it fun? I love how he said it. He goes, because if it's boring, I know myself, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to want to do the work. He used the word lazy. And then third, I love it. Third thing was, does it make money? Is it profitable?
Absolutely. That's what we're here
are we
for.
ringing the cash register? Because at the end of the day, if it's not doing that, he talked about you have responsibilities, you have other things to do, and your attention is valuable. And I think that's what he's really clear on.
I think there are a lot of different ways I could go with this last one. I think his story about working for horrible bosses resonates, right? I really love that. But I think one of the big things that I would take away is he mentioned it throughout, I felt a few times, that sometimes we may have to make the hard decisions. And a lot of times we have to base it on data. But I would also say that sometimes we have to base it on those that are listening, those that are talking to us. He talked about family and friends that we don't earn $1 from, but yet their voice can be pretty loud. And he's just said it's different when I have friends who are in it like I am and are an entrepreneur and they get it. And so I always just come back to how are you making those decisions? And really, what is your community? Who's surrounding you? Who's sharing your enthusiasm about it?
And hopefully we're that community for our listeners, right?
I sure hope so. Yes.
Yep.
So friends, as always, if you're listening,
keep listening.
You've been listening to the Serial Entrepreneur Show, produced by the team here at SmartCookie Media.